Welcome and thank you so much for coming this afternoon. And a special thanks to His Excellency Ambassador Atkanbayar, the Embassy of Mongolia, and the Mongolian Cultural Center. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our Director of General and International Collections for his opening remarks, Dr. Eugene Flanagan.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome here to the Library of Congress this afternoon. As you probably know, over the last decade, the Library and the Mongolian Studies Conference have built a wonderful scholarly rapport, and given this mutual interest, the conference keynote was moved to the Library in 2016. And in past conferences, we've heard a wide-ranging series of talks about the archives and history in Mongolia and America, the Dilioar Haktuktu in American journalism, the critical importance of science and the rule of law in protecting the integrity of Mongolia's Lake Hufskull National Park. And this year, we continue the tradition with today's exploration of Mongolian paleontology. So I'm happy to welcome you all here today because the Asian Division here at the Library of Congress has one of the largest Mongolian collections in the United States, as well as resources in all Asian languages. And after the talk, I hope you will take advantage of the opportunity to learn more about our collections and visit the Asian Reading Room, where you'll experience a special display put on for you today from the Mongolian collection here at the Library of Congress. But now I would like to welcome His Excellency Yondan Atkanbayar, Ambassador of Mongolia to the United States, also the embassy staff, the Mongolian Cultural Center, and its president, Sarul Erdene Mikmar, and all the conference participants to the Library of Congress again this year. Now it is my pleasure to welcome the ambassador to the podium for his talk on Mongolia and the First World War.
Good afternoon, everybody. I didn't dare to call my intervention as a research paper because in the morning there was quite inquisitive questions about the professions of ambassadors. So I'm a diplomat, but who is interested in history? So it's just sharing of my couple of thoughts about World War I and its implication on Mongolia. Well, at a glance, events that are not interrelated, but very much interrelated when you go into deep. Last year, we celebrated 100 years of the end of the World War I. And, most Mongolians are not aware that World War I had played a serious role on the fate of Mongolia. And also, most Mongolians, and I'm sure most Americans, are not aware that we were technically at the side of Entente during this global conflict. Because Mongolia was, that time, at least de jure, autonomous province of the Chinese Republic, which declared war on Germany in 1917. Beginning of the World War I itself played significant role in tripartite negotiations over the fate of Mongolia in Kyakhta in 1914 and 1915. Because when Russia signed first agreement with Mongolia in 1912, the first Balkan War was already raging in Europe. And when the negotiations with China started, the Second Balkan War was taking place. So obviously, Russia was deeply interested to regulate possible conflict in the eastern border when they have a possible conflict in the western border with the Ottoman Empire for the defense of the Slavic countries in the Balkans, and then Ottoman empires, and then subsequently Austro-Hungary and Germany. And Mongolian Prime Minister at that time, I forgot my presentation. Yeah. Well, this is actually the picture of the Mongolian minister who signed 1912 Mongolian-Russian agreement. Well, that's something that plays a lot of important role. The borders are shown as on today. That's the China Eastern Railway, at the time under Russian jurisdiction, and it was extremely important for the Russian Empire to keep control over the China Eastern Railways because most of the war supplies from the United States was going through this line, obviously because European lines were cut because of the ongoing conflict. Well, this is the visit of Mongolian Prime Minister Sayın Namnansurung, and that's his visit in the Russian Foreign Ministry in the end of the 1913. And during this visit, Russians actually made or forced Mongolians to understand that they have to come into agreement with China along the lines of Russian-Chinese declaration. And the Sayın Han, during this visit, he brought specifically Inner Mongolian Prince Odai with him as part of the delegation, showing Russians that Mongolia intends to have Inner Mongolia, within its borders. Well, this is actually Mongolian army in 1913 war. Probably most Americans do not know that we waged quite successful war in 1913 against Chinese in Inner Mongolia. Out of 65 battles, I think we lost only 4. So that was quite successful war on Mongolian side, but Russians actually, at the beginning, they could preempt this war, but they did not, because obviously hostilities in Inner Mongolia would have forced Russian hands during the negotiation with Chinese. But when they came into agreement with Chinese over the fate of Mongolia, then they started pressurizing on Mongolians to recall their forces from Inner Mongolia. At the time, to the extent that they would threaten to terminate all military supplies and financial aids to Mongolia. Well, in this connection, when Russia was facing war in the western borders, and the war was, after the Second Balkan War, it was inevitable that the war is going to be pretty large. It's not going to be only Balkan conflict. So in this situation, obviously Russia could not support total independence of Mongolia because great powers had an agreement that they would not challenge territorial integrity of China. So if Russia would claim Mongolia, then probably Japan would come in to claim Manchuria or Korea, and the British would come to claim some other territories. So they could not do that. And second reason was that Russia was interested to get China in the Entente alliance, because through China, their important supply routes were going on. So that's why in tripartite conference, you see the delegates negotiating this tripartite conference in 1914. When this conference has started, World War I was already raging. In June 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo. In July, Austria-Hungary delivered ultimatum to Serbia, and Russia started mobilization. In return, Germany started mobilization. And in the end of July, Russia declared war on Germany and Austria-Hungary. And in August, Germany declared war on France, and Great Britain declared war on Germany, etc. So the war was already the fact. So in this situation, Russians were trying to impress upon, stubborn Mongolians to not to act, in defense of their independence, but rather to accept the autonomous status of autonomy. Well, and they had also to pressurize on China not to go beyond autonomy as far as Mongolia is concerned. Well, having said this, when we talk about World War I, obviously the impact of World War I on the fate of Mongolia is, at first glance, it's very obvious because it's the Bolshevik Revolution 1917, creation in the civil war in Russia. So the Mongolian environment has drastically changed, which influenced on the fate of Mongolia. Of course, the Great War, which was fought thousands of miles away, was not directly felt in Mongolia or even in China. I mean, Chinese involvement in the World War I was limited to 140,000 Chinese laborers dispatched to France as Chinese labor corps of British Army. But there were certainly separate incidents which would prove on which side Mongolia was in this war. For example, when I've referred about this important supply route through China Eastern Railway line, obviously the German intelligence activities were concentrated around the disruption of supply through these lines, and German-financed Gongwei Tuang Society, they have made successful subversive activities at Weishahei, Imianpo, Lashaogong, Harbin, in those areas. And in 1917, captain of German army, Christian von Pappenheim, he was a descendant of famous general of Holy Roman Empire, von Pappenheim. He came to northeastern China, and he tried to recruit Mongolian commander Harchindu Bao Zhu. Now you see his photo, for the subversive activities along the lines of China Eastern Railways. Well, Bao Zhu was a very interesting person because he did not recognize Kyakhta tripartite agreement, and he was fighting his own war with China. In 1915, he was chased into Mongolian territory by Chinese, and he was chased out of Mongolian territory by Mongolians. But obviously, he maintained some kind of discreet relationship with the Mongolian government through Eastern Mongolian holy man Yuguzir Hotukto. So he informed Mongolian authorities about the German subversive group, and the Mongolian government directed him to stop this German group's activities for the sake of friendly relations with the Russian Empire. Bao Zhu arrested and executed unsuspecting Germans, and the Russian Secret Service was very grateful for him for the services of Bao Zhu for preempting possible subversive activities on China Eastern Railways, and even promised some weapons for his fight against the Chinese. Of course, promises have never been realized because it would infuriate China for that purpose. Well, this was a small incident, but it clearly shows on whose part Mongolia was in this ongoing global conflict. The end of World War I had direct impact on both China and Mongolia. When you go through the history of Mongolia, I mean, I started asking myself why Chinese armies entered into Mongolia in 1990. Why did they did not enter in 1917 when there was Russia was caught between two revolutions, February and October revolutions, and obviously, well, had very little ability to care about remote border areas? Why did not they enter in 1918 when Russia was caught in the middle of the civil war, and obviously there was no one to defend Mongolian interest in case of the invasion? And why they entered in 1919, late 1919, because Chinese battalions entered into Mongolian capital only October 1919. And to explain that, we have to see what was the China's position at the time. China entered into World War I upon the conditions that in the end of the successful end of the World War I, all German spheres of influence, including Shandong province, would be returned to China. But after the end of the World War I, when in Versailles they held peace conference in 1919, Western leaders, David Lloyd George, Georges Clemenceau, and others, paid very little attention to Chinese, to the promises that were made to China. China requested for the abolition of privileges of foreign powers, including extraterritoriality, canceling 21 demands of Japan, return to China and all the territories and the rights in Shandong province. But because of the Japanese pressure, they had to agree to the transfer of all the rights in Shandong from Germany to Japan. In 1917, this Japanese Prime Minister Masatake Terauchi, he sent his personal envoy, private businessman Nishihara Kamezo, to negotiate a series of 8 loans to Chinese government worth of 145 million yen. Well, Nishihara's financing was backed by Finance Minister Shoda Kazue. And, well, these were ostensibly private loans made by private bankers in the development of China. However, in reality, the loans were underwritten by Japanese government in assisting Duan Chirui government in his civil war to overcome his rivals in China. So in return for the financial support, Japan received confirmation of its claims to the former German Kachou Bay concession in Shandong province, control of the railways in Shandong province, and additional rights in Manchuria. So when the loans and details of agreement were leaked to public, Duan Chirui was attacked for having made such treacherous deals with Japanese. And some of the rights granted to Japan were very similar to the 5th clause of the 21 demands made by Japan. So the popular discontent and anger by failure of Chinese delegation in Paris Peace Conference to secure back Shandong province and, well, shameless trading of Chinese territory and Chinese citizens for Japanese money quickly grew into the May 4th movement in China. Well, this is, yeah. And these mass protests and resistance movement of May 4th resulted in the loss of faith by Beijing government with the disclosure of the Nishihara loans agreement made by Beijing rulers. So the government got quite nervous over the fact, because for rulers of China, be them Mongolian Khan or Chinese emperor or Manchu emperor or Chinese militarist general or a communist dictator, losing a moral right to govern over China is equal to self-annihilation. It's the notion of the mandate of heaven, which if it is lost, that was much more important than external developments for the Chinese governments, in all governments. So Prime Minister Duan Chirui was required to think of something to explain these Japanese loans in order to avoid the public blame. So what he thought of was annexation of Outer Mongolia. So he basically explained to the Chinese citizen that, well, we got this Japanese loan to create northeastern border army and get Outer Mongolia back. So this was the explanation that was given. He basically said internal strife and unsuccessful war made Russia extremely weak and unable to attend Mongolian affairs. That provides the opportunity for China to abolish the autonomy of this borderland and unite with the Republic of China. Mongolia found itself in a difficult situation in 1919, obviously because of the civil war in Russia, and because of, to be very frank, not very wise movements made by Mongolian government at that time. because when when Bolshevik Revolution had occurred, Bolsheviks annulled all the secret agreements made by the Russian Tsar, including Kyakhta Agreement. So, well, legally speaking, Mongolian autonomy was not recognized in that terms. Well, Mongolians were really willing to unite all the Mongolian territories. So in 1918, Mongolians placed most of their military in Tuva, Uryanka region of Russia, which was secretly supported by Chinese government. And Mongolian government was not aware that they are gradually coming on the path of revising Kyakhta Agreement that was agreed between the two countries. So in late 1919, General Su Shujiang's army entered into Mongolia. First detachment was 4,000 soldiers. So when he arrived in Mongolia, he immediately demanded petition by the nobility to give up autonomy. He even gave the deadline of November 15. He organized a series of demonstrations of power by parading soldiers in front of the Prime Minister's house. And one more development which was taking place that time in 1918, Russian army colonel, he self-declared general, Ataman Semyonov, he thought of creating pan-Mongol state. That's, you can see the borders of the state that he was planning to do, which played in the hand of Chinese, because Chinese has said, well, there is obviously a threat to Mongolia, so we have to place our soldiers in Mongolia to defend Mongolia from possible invasion of the White Guards. So when in November 17, the petition was submitted to Chinese president issued a decree annulling the Kyakhta Agreement on Outer Mongolia and abolishing Mongolian autonomy at the request of Mongolian nobles and lamas. And when Russians protested, they said, well, it was done at the wish of Mongolians themselves. So this is actually one of the influence that the end of the World War II had on Mongolia. But another influence that we do not also pay too much attention is that rise of the new power in the international relations, in the world, and particularly in the Far East. That's rise of the United States of America. Because by the end of the World War I, America was strong enough to influence on the international relations. That time America was still a little bit far from shying away the isolationist attitude of the local populace. But they were quite interested in influencing the international relations in the Pacific, in the Far East. In the summer of 1918, Mongolian Prime Minister Saino Yinghang, Namnun Surung, one of the main religious leaders, Jalkhan Sotokto Damdin Bazar, they secretly met American traders who arrived in Ikhure. And after this meeting, U.S. Trade Attaché Ferin wrote to State Department, Mongolians are generally friendly to Americans and obviously are afraid from Russians and Japanese. As they are far away from America, they believe that they pose no interest to the United States. If USA opens consulate in Urga, it will be beneficial in political and trade terms and conducive for the development of this beautiful country. And in February 1919, US Ambassador to China, Paul Range, proposed to open consulate either in Kalgan or Urga, based upon the reports of his trade counselor, J. Arnolds. Well, decision of Mongolian nobility to look for establishment of relations with the United States was not occasional one. Since the declaration of independence in 1911, Mongolians were in search of the third power which could effectively get involved in Mongolian question. All Mongolian efforts to woo other powers, Great Britain, France, Japan, in 1912 and 1913, did not bring any results because these powers were entangled in numerous secret treaties with the Russian Empire, so they did not, they were not willing to come into these relationships with Mongolia. In attempt to approach Kaiser Germany was immediately blocked by Russians. In fact, during the visit of Mongolian Foreign Minister Cheng Wang-Han-Dorje in 1913 to Russia, the Russian Foreign Ministry official Kazakov directly told him that the Empire of Russia and Kaiser Germany are in hostile relationship. Any attempt to deal with Germany would be regarded as hostile action. So appearance of USA among the great powers and perhaps the principle of morality in Woodrow Wilson's 14th point in Versailles Peace Conference brought the hopes in the Mongolian nobility that there is a nation with the moralistic foreign policy guidelines and not entangled in secret treaties with other powers. So United States might be a power that could become a third influential party in Mongolian question. However, it was not destined to happen because, in end of the 1990s, the Mongolian autonomy was abolished. And after the abolition of Mongolian autonomy, Mongolian leaders tried again to get support of the United States. In Delo Hotokto Jamsranjev, in his recollection of the memoirs on Outer Mongolia, he wrote, Jalkhans Hotokto and the other nobles secretly convened and decided to approach America for the assistance, as America was rich and powerful and was well known for its willingness to support weak nations. It was agreed for sure Chinese government would not dare to ignore words of the American government. They have approached Bogdahan with this suggestion, and Bogdahan greatly agreed to this suggestion. He appointed Jalkhans Hotokto as a delegate to visit Beijing under the pretext of delivering presents from Bogd Lama to the President of China, and he was requested to convey a wish to keep Mongolians peaceful and meet representatives of America with a request for assistance. It has been discussed with the trader of Anderson Meyer's company, Larson, and the delegation left in his car secretly on the third day of first month of winter. So in Beijing, Jalkhans secretly met U.S. Charles I Charles Tenney, because the range was gone by that time, and conveyed Bogdahan's letter suggesting the establishment of relations between the two countries. But this letter was never answered. This is actually the photo of the delegation which was in Beijing in 1920 to deliver the present of Bogdahan to the President of the Republic of China. So after the World War I, main question, or maybe question of utmost importance for USA in the Far East, was control over the growing power of Empire of Japan. Washington was preparing a naval conference with the aim of limiting naval rivalry between USA and Japan in the Pacific. So American objectives were to restrain Japanese naval expansion in the waters of the West Pacific and to agree to the favorable naval ratio vis-a-vis Japan and have the Japanese to accept the continuation of open door policy in China. Well, Japanese approached the conference with different aim to sign a naval treaty with Britain and the United States, which would limit also the growth of the Navy. And secondly, to obtain official recognition of Japan's special interest in Manchuria and Mongolia. Yeah, this is the photo of the Washington Naval Conference. So in such circumstances, obviously, the United States was limited in Mongolian question. On one hand, they were restrained with clearly stated Japanese interest in Mongolia, which they could not offend. On the other hand, they could not alienate China, seen as an important possible ally in the Pacific against Japan, in the future war. So during the visit of U.S. Consul Charles Eberhard to Mongolia in April 1920, he was handed over the letter from the Mongolian nobility requesting again for American assistance in restoring autonomy of Mongolia, and Eberhard had clearly indicated to Mongolian leaders that Mongolians better not to expect concrete outcome of such a correspondence. And that's how Mongolians realized that USA was not intending to get involved in Mongolian affairs. So if you see the memoirs of participants of these events, you can clearly see that US response prompted Mongolian leadership to lean towards the Soviet Russia as only possible power that could be interested in Mongolian affairs. In his memoirs, Dilip Khotukto, witness of those events, he recalled that Boto and Chagdarchuk from Mongolian People's Party approached him to discuss with Jalkhans Khotukto a possibility of obtaining letter from Bogd Khan requesting assistance from Soviet Russia. And first time, Jalkhans Khotukto neither denied nor approved the suggestion. But in June, after the meeting with the US Consul Eberhard, Hatanbatar Maksarjev and Jalkhans Khotukto have been approached again by the members of the Mongolian People's Party, and they got a reply. Now Bogd Khan regards this favorably and said these commoners and Red Russia would be of help for the revival of the country. Obviously, he meant the time has come. So these interesting events suggest that United States could play a very important role in the very beginning of the creation of Mongolia in the early 20th century. And our trade was not small by that time. Actually, when US Consul Sokhobin met Mongolian Prime Minister to request for a military convoy for the US trade shipment, and Mongolian Prime Minister Boto asked why you want to have a military convoy. And Consul Sokhobin explained, first of all, there are going to be two Chinese who were working in the American company in Mongolia who will be traveling with the convoy, and they are afraid that on the way Mongolians might molest these Chinese. And secondly, he said that the shipment was worth of 150,000 Mexican dollars. And I inquired what is 150,000 Mexican dollars in 1921. Military frigate of British Navy, medium size, would cost 250,000 Mexican dollars. So this was actually the amount of trade. If one shipment was worth of half military ship, so how many shipments did we have that time? So there was a significant amount of trade. And I always tell to my American friends that interest to Mongolia was always high in the United States. No one knew who sponsored Roy Chapman Andrews' expedition to Mongolia in 1921. You would be surprised. $50,000 was donated by John D. Rockefeller, $50,000 by J.P. Morgan, $50,000 by Standard Oil, and $50,000 by First National Bank. So the whole expedition costed $250,000. And all the big names of America have financed this expedition. So this was the interest on both sides. Well, unfortunately, all the relations did not come through. Why I'm just sharing my thoughts on that is that perhaps we need to see more, I would like to appeal to the scholars here. Perhaps we need to see the events in Mongolian history in relation of what was happening around us or in the world, and their direct impact on the fate of Mongolia. So, this is my couple of thoughts, and I'll be happy to answer questions if there is any. I don't know whether... I don't know whether I do have time for questions or no. Do I? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so if, well, moderator allows one question. So okay, two. So, no question. So it means that either it was very clear or it was not clear at all. Yes, please.
In Mongolia. This is very, okay. Yeah, I'm from Mongol, so for me it's very enlightening talk, so thank you for that. So I just have a very brief question. You mentioned this person, Smirnov. Can you tell us a little bit, I'm totally unfamiliar, what was his sort of ethnic background? Why was he sort of advocating, in modern day we'll call this pan-Mongol cause?
Well, Semyonov was a son of a Buryat woman. So he had some kind of Mongolian blood in it. And during the World War I, he came up with the idea of the national divisions in Russian army. So he was sent to Buryatia to form a Buryat National Cossack Division. And when the Civil War has started, he obviously ended up in Siberia, and he tried to create a kind of pan-Mongolian government with capital in Hailar, consisting of Buryatia, Tuva, Mongolia, Inner Mongolia. So, and obviously financed by Japanese. So it did not, he was not successful because even Kolchak government, the White Russian government, did not recognize his plans because Kolchak was of the view that Russia should be undivided and powerful. So if he allows Mongolia to separate, then he would allow Ukraine next day and, I don't know, other parts of Russia same day. So the Kolchak government did not recognize his ideas, and Mongolians also did not recognize because Mongolians were afraid that whatever small autonomy that they had under Kyakhta Agreement would be waived out if they side with Kolchak. That brings also another important, interesting question. Actually, the Baron Ungren, Med Baron, he was part of Semyonov's army. So you may ask if, 3 months earlier you rejected his boss to align with Mongolians, and 3 months later suddenly he invites the remnants of his army into Mongolia. And I always believed that Mongolians did it on intentional purpose. They were aware that White Russians are not going to stay in Mongolia, and White Russians does not have future at all, but they used them in order to bring the Red Russians, because obviously if you invite White Russians, Red Russians will come after them. So if you have Russians besides you, you are not afraid of China, right? That was the implications. Thank you. Any question? Okay, please.
Wait for the mic.
Very interesting presentation, thank you. And I heard that there was some influence from United States on the October Revolution in Russia. So you mentioned there was a certain period of time when China had chance to take over Mongolia and Russia was busy with some other activities, right? So it's not exactly related to your presentation, but in your study, have you found any historical event or any type of agreement between Russian government for October Revolution, and was there any type of funding or influence from United States?
Well, that goes probably into the insinuation for the conspiracy theories. There are a lot of theories related with that. I'm not convinced that was the main reason for the October Revolution. October Revolution was probably an internal event. You may say with the same success for the Germans, because Germans were obviously interested to get Russians out of the war, so they financed Bolsheviks. There are a number of evidences related with that. You can also relate that with the interest of the Rothschild into Baku oil and the control over the Baku oil between Rothschild and other groups. But I believe that that was not the main interest, and at least as far as U.S. government is concerned, probably they were, following with great interest and maybe intending to use, for some extent, the October Revolution, but they never designed or planned that. Yeah, and Mongolia was seen in this only as part of the Far Eastern interest. By the way, U.S. intelligence activities in Mongolia were looked after the Navy Department, by the Navy Department, not by the U.S. intelligence community at that time. Roy Chapman Andrews was a spy of the Navy Department. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for a fascinating talk. I think that the mention of Roy Chapman Andrews is a good transition to our next topic, which is a little different discussion. I'm very happy to introduce our speaker, Dr. Bolortsegtseg Minjin. Bolortsegtseg Minjin is a paleontologist who focuses on the protection of fossils in her native country, Mongolia. She received her PhD in 2007 from a joint program between the American Museum of Natural History and the City University of New York. Shortly after completing her graduate work, she founded the Institute for the Study of Mongolian Dinosaurs, which over the past 10 years has launched expeditions that have discovered new fossil species. She has also sponsored and trained Mongolian graduate students in paleontology and geology, and has inspired children in the remote Gobi Desert through an on-site educational program. In 2012, Bolortsegtseg played a pivotal role in stopping the sale of the illegally collected skeleton of Tyrannosaur batar from Mongolia, and coordinated the repatriation, return, and exhibition of this specimen in Mongolia. She also worked closely with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to reveal a vast illegal market of the sale of Mongolian fossils. Much of this network was subsequently shut down, and she spearheaded the return of over 30 stolen dinosaurs to Mongolia. In 2012, she returned to Mongolia to help establish the Central Museum of Mongolian Dinosaurs, where the Tyrannosaurus batar and other specimens were displayed. Initially, a temporary museum was constructed in Sukbatar Square in Ulaanbaatar, and huge lines formed to see Mongolia's first dinosaur celebrity. Bolortsegtseg received a 2009 Earth Award from Wings World Quest and is a 2010 Emerging Explorer of National Geographic. In 2013, she was awarded a Polar Star by the Mongolian government for her efforts to protect the fossil heritage of Mongolia. And in 2017, she received the Raymond M. Alf Award for Excellence in Paleontological Research and Education. Her latest project involves creating Dinosaur Conservation Park, which includes the Flaming Cliffs, Bayansak, and Tugun Shiri in Mongolia. We are delighted to have her present her talk today, Lessons Learned from the Repatriation of Mongolian Dinosaurs. Welcome, Dr. Bolortsegtseg.
Sorry, I'm a little too tall now. Okay, yeah. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Dr. Flanagan, for welcoming me here in the Library of Congress. And this is such an honor to present about Mongolian dinosaur fossil heritage. So my presentation will have like 4 sections. So I'll start my presentation, briefly talk about commercialization of dinosaur fossils, and then I'll talk about my advocacy work on Mongolian fossils. And then last 7 years, I've been working on repatriation project with Homeland Security and U.S. Attorney Office, and of course, Mongolian President's Office and Mongolian government. So I will talk about that project, and then I will end my presentation with my work on awareness of Mongolian dinosaur fossils and educational outreach to local communities in the Gobi Desert. Okay, so this is a picture of team of Central Asiatic expedition from American Museum of Natural History. This expedition was led by Roy Chapman Andrews. So the main purpose of this expedition was to look for evidence for human origin in Asia. So instead, they actually found quite fossil-rich locality in the Gobi Desert called Beijing. It's also known as Flaming Cliffs. So this was quite sensational discovery, and at the same time, it's very important for Mongolia because Mongolia's first dinosaur fossils been found from this site, and many of them were new to science. So including dinosaur you see on the top, it's called Protoceratops andrewsi. So this is the first dinosaur described scientifically and named after the leader of the expedition. So this dinosaur is a plant-eating dinosaur, and in terms of size, like sheep-sized, quite commonly found from Flaming Cliffs. And then in addition to this dinosaur, also called Velociraptor mongoliensis, meat-eating dinosaur. Another name for this dinosaur, you probably know raptor from famous movie Jurassic Park. So we have like a Hollywood star dinosaur. So, so there's many species of dinosaurs been discovered, and also other vertebrates, including mammals as well. In addition to that, this picture you're looking at is a dinosaur eggs. So first dinosaur egg nest was discovered in Mongolia by this expedition. So it was quite sensational. And so around 1920s, you just heard from my previous presentation, Ambassador Atkambayer talked about, during the time in early 20s, in terms of political situation, how it was in Mongolia. So this expedition was also affected by this change was happening from Mongolia basically becoming a socialist country after Russia, and kind of like gradually closing to Western world, Western countries. And so the future of this expedition was kind of unclear. But at the same time, there's one event happened back in New York when, scientists from that expedition went back to New York, and then they needed to raise money for their following expedition. So Roy Chapman Andrews had an idea that because how much attention this dinosaur egg has been getting through media and public, so he thought, okay, so maybe, we can sell one dinosaur egg and raise this money to fund the next expedition. So it happened, and so egg was actually auctioned for $5,000, the single egg. So the egg was purchased by a businessman called Austin Colgate, and so he actually donated this egg to Colgate University. So egg is still stored and cataloged in that university, and university professors and students actually did some research work on it. So, and then Andrews actually regretted his decision And of course, was, not a good reason to shut down this expedition. And then following 70 years, Western scientists couldn't able to do expeditions, collect fossils. And then Russian, Soviet scientists and Polish scientists worked in Mongolia. They made many more important dinosaur fossil discoveries to science. Unfortunately, most of those fossils left the country, just as the same thing happened to expedition from American Museum of Natural History. So all those dinosaur fossils and all discoveries been sent back to New York. So still now there, if you go to New York, you can see it on the exhibits, our first dinosaurs. So this is basically marks the first time Mongolian fossils being sold in auction and price tag actually put on fossil. Well, then in 1990, Mongolia had a democratic revolution. So Mongolia transitioned from socialist to democratic country. But at the same time, economy basically collapsed. And because of economical difficulties, people were selling anything they could make money out of it, including dinosaur eggs. So during, in early 90s was a really bad time. Even myself, at the time, I was a college student, so I did witness a fellow student was selling a dinosaur egg to tourists. So he basically said, okay, this dinosaur can cost $5,000 almost. Then I just wonder, so how he got this information. And this is basically we're talking about 70 years ago this auction happened. And then now this is the effect we're getting some way. So these, eggs been sold to foreign tourists and foreigners, and this has been documented on Mongolian Customs newsletter. And here's a couple of examples. One of report basically saying foreign diplomat actually was trying to get the dinosaur egg out of the country, being caught. And also Japanese tourists had 3 dinosaur eggs in his luggage, and including dinosaur fossils, trying to take it out of the country and being caught. And in this report actually specifically they say, well, this is actually the numbers are increasing, number of dinosaur egg fossils and dinosaur fossils been leaving the country legally. So this is so that suggests there is a market, right? So at the time it was more black market, people selling things under the table. I had an opportunity to join expedition by American Museum of Natural History in the early 90s when Mongolia opened to Western country, and they invited scientists from this museum. And so I had an opportunity to join them. At the time, I was a master's student. I was studying 400 million year old fossil corals from Gobi Desert. I had interest to study dinosaurs, so this was a great opportunity for me to join this expedition. Then eventually I continued my graduate school in New York City. So I landed in New York 1997. So right after I landed, 10 days after I landed, and I learned about this auction that happened in New York. And this dinosaur, now a lot of people know it's the most famous dinosaur, Tyrannosaurus rex, especially this one is Sioux from Field Museum. Now it's housed in Field Museum. So back in 1997, this dinosaur was sold in auction $8.36 million. This is really bad news to us. This is basically putting price on dinosaur, putting price tag on dinosaur, but this is priceless. So the effect of this, we started to see Mongolian fossils in major auction houses. For example, you see a couple of Mongolian dinosaurs in bonums, and top one is, as you know, our first dinosaur, Protoceratops. The bottom one is very rare carnivorous dinosaur skull. So as I said, in the early 90s, this was like a black market, right, under the table, but now it's becoming more public. So market is expanding. Anybody who has the money, you pay and go auction to buy Mongolian fossils. This is really bad. And then not only auction houses, also we start to see Mongolian fossils, dinosaur fossils on eBay. This specific one was sold by a French company. So this is another very rare carnivorous dinosaur for $300,000. Put it on eBay. So back in Mongolia, so this is what you see. When you go to the fossil sites where dinosaurs been dug out and broken pieces of dinosaur bones, and this is clearly some important large-sized carnivorous dinosaur skeletons being broken up. It probably was probably was articulated. So what's happening is, in the beginning, people were selling eggs, and then eventually what happened, people started doing head hunting. They have even term head hunting, because they go to the body parts that cost more money, and as fast as they can to dug it out without being caught. So teeth and claws and skull, and rest of remaining parts, they just totally destroy. And we're losing a lot of information from this, scientifically, very important things. Could have been something new that we can put in a museum. You add to your knowledge about, Earth history and excite the kids about science. So this is what's damage was happening, multiple places in Mongolia, out in the Gobi Desert. So this has really bothered me. And so right after I finished my PhD in New York, so I started my advocacy work on Mongolian fossils. We have to change this. We have to bring this awareness, what's going on, especially to Mongolian government. We have to get, enforce the law already exists in Mongolia. So I approached some number of politicians. So the most common question I would get was like, this is not my area. Then direct me to some other politicians, and then they would say, it's a very important issue. Unfortunately, I'm working on different policies and laws can help out. So it was quite, challenging for me. But then, by chance, I met this politician, Oingerl Tidiptam, just my vacationing in northern Mongolia, and happened to meet on the road. And so right away, I didn't really knew about her much back then, but I heard she was going to run for election. So I quickly introduced the issues and problems on Mongolian dinosaur fossils. So I met her 2005. And then I keep in my contact with her and asked her to read these books. So these books about, can really tell her the background information on Mongolian fossils and history of, how discoveries made, even dinosaur fossil markets. So it was really good. I felt really good that, at least one politician paid attention. Then 2012, May 17th, I was in New York and looking at this local news broadcasting about a dinosaur auction. So basically saying, this beautiful, nearly complete skeleton of dinosaur from Central Asia was going to be auctioned starting bit from $850,000. So it's a size of about 8 foot, high and 24 foot long. It's a close relative of better-known dinosaur, Tyrannosaurus rex. It's a cousin of T-Rex from Mongolia. So right away, I actually wrote email back to Mongolia to Oyungerel, her name for short Oyuna, so I should say Oyuna, it's easier for me. So I sent email to Oyuna. I just said just one, sentence. Mongolia needs to act. We have to stop this auction. That's all. I don't have to say anything to her because she read those books I gave her. She knew what I was telling. So she right away went to president's office. And then next day, president actually did this press release basically saying, we're starting an investigation on this auction on Turbosaurus batar. So what is the lesson learned from this? So I learned that not many politicians are interested in fossils. So change takes long time, 6 years till Tibetar case. For some people might think it's like happened overnight. No, it's like years of thing. You really get, you have to do this advocacy of work, trying to get attention and awareness to Mongolian government. So it's helpful to have a reading list for politicians if you have any issues and things, so they can really understand deep, into the issues and problems. So president's office, Mongolian president's office actually asked me to represent president for this court case, not court case, sorry, in auction problem, the things going on. And so I wrote a letter to president of Heritage Auctions, simply asking to postpone the auction till we find out the origin of this dinosaur, where it came from. Unfortunately, they say they're not going to stop the auction. They're going to continue, matter of what, because all the documents are legal. So right day before the auction, I went to Heritage Auctions, saw the dinosaur in person. So this is the picture I took. And then also I wanted to confirm what I saw on the news and on pictures, to be sure if this was from Mongolia. So I got very confident this dinosaur was in fact from Mongolia, just looking at, closely anatomy and coloration and preservation. So I got an email back from Heritage Auctions lawyer. That email said about auction is continue. So I basically wrote back to Mongolia. I said, okay, we need a lawyer. We have to find a lawyer. So they found, the president's office found an American lawyer, Robert Painter, the man standing in the middle with this orange tie. He's based in Houston, Texas. So he was able to get a temporary restraining order day before the auction, so to hold off the auction for 10 days till the provenance, the origin of fossils been determined. So in June 10th, around that time, that's basically after, a few weeks after the auction, so Heritage Auctions allowed us to see the dinosaur, to examine it. So we had 3 paleontologists, including myself, the tall man standing there. He's a Phil Curry, he's Canadian dinosaur paleontologist, and Dr. Tokbatter from Paleontological Institute in Mongolia. So back in Mongolia, actually Ambassador Advocacy, he was at the time the Minister of Science, Education, and Culture. There were a team of people working under his leadership. So we were back and forth emails and, basically day and night, because time difference actually really helped, because here mornings I working, and then there, morning here I sleep and they working, so really like continuously 24 hours, so whole team working to get this dinosaur. And then Homeland Security came to Heritage Auctions, this storage, and took the dinosaur. So this is basically the court battle to get this dinosaur lasted about, close to a year. And then the American citizen, Eric Prokopi, he actually, so they found him guilty. And then the judge made a decision that this dinosaur belongs to Mongolia. So that was a very happy news to us. It basically was a turning point. So this is the first time, ever Mongolia getting back our heritage back to the country. So, and then this was our first repatriation. So Tibetar repatriated in 2013. So we had this, nice ceremony that included Homeland Security, U.S. Attorney Office, Southern District of New York, and of course, Mongolian delegates came. Then, Mongolian government gave award to the American U.S. Attorney Office staff and Homeland Security. So it was quite teamwork. So after the repatriation, so we received the dinosaurs. So right before we sent to Mongolia, so I cataloged everything. So I putting, numbers on every single specimen, documenting for Mongolian government. And at the same time, another thing happened at the time. First time, Mongolia established dinosaur museum. So it's called Central Museum of Mongolian Dinosaurs. So it took almost 100 years since the discovery of dinosaurs in Mongolia, we having first dinosaur museum. So the first specimen was the Tibetar from, this auction. And so the catalog number for this dinosaur is 1, so number 1. So, So dinosaurs sent back to Mongolia, but of course we didn't have a right venue. We had a name for the museum, but there weren't any venue to display. So there's a pop-up exhibit that we did in front of the Parliament building. So it was a quite sensation because the dinosaur took a lot of media attention here internationally in US and Mongolia. So Mongolians got so excited, they want to see this famous dinosaur. So within 3 months, basically 500,000 people of Mongolia came to see this dinosaur. We never ever had any history, got that much attention on a dinosaur ever. So that's basically 15% of the population. We have 3 million people. So that was a quite success. It really brought the awareness, and people, really see that. Even some people said, "Oh, we didn't know we had a dinosaur." And that's the thing. It's not their fault. What happened is when dinosaurs left the country, left with the knowledge. So we lost a lot. So this is, dinosaurs coming back. People really want to know. And one of the day, I actually did the tour myself, talking about the dinosaur, and people almost crushed me. They're just coming from all directions. They asking all kinds of questions and how we can help. This is really exciting. I never seen such thing. So in 2 years, so basically we were looking for building for this new museum, and so basically former Lenin's museum was chosen to be a place to exhibit this dinosaur. So you can see, when you go in, you can see this statue staring at you. This is really huge and heavy. But at the same time, around this time, this was a battle between 2 main parties, Democratic Party and Mongolia's People's Party, fighting on this building. And then Mongolian fossils become political issue, which shouldn't have been. So And following Tibetar's repatriation, we got our second turn of dinosaurs came in 2014. So those dinosaurs been seized from Eric Prokopi, the guy who had Tibetar, the first from that auction, and also his partner Chris Moore from England. He had 17 Mongolian dinosaurs. So this time we got 22 dinosaurs, but this is like when I'm going through all these, it's actually more than 22. And you can see picture on the right, there's a bunch of big white, pile of things, big rocky things, but those jacket, inside each of them has dinosaur bones and skeletons. So it was quite a bit of work. So I actually I asked some of friends to volunteer me to help out for packaging. There were some dinosaurs been, some bones been damaged, even need to train some of the volunteers prep the fossils some way, So, and then in July 10th, 2014, we had our second ceremony and getting all those fossils back to Mongolia. And then again, there's another repatriation happened in 2016. But these fossils are different. Actually, a few of them came from private museum from US. And also, if you remember from my previous slide on eBay, this French company was selling this dinosaur on eBay. So we were able to get this dinosaur skull. This is very rare dinosaur. It's only been known by only part of the skull. This is nearly complete, beautifully preserved dinosaur skull, carnivorous dinosaur skull. So this one sent back to Mongolia 2016. So it was quite exciting. Something new. So then third repatriation happened 2016. So that's we actually this repatriation ceremony was a little different. So what happened is New York Attorney Office, Eastern District of New York staff asked me to create some educational activity for kids. They wanted to have us some, bring awareness. So we had American and Mongolian kids in this ceremony, and so I was teaching them about dinosaurs, Mongolian dinosaurs. So it was really, I really liked, how, this whole ceremony happened. So we have a fourth repatriation coming soon. So this one, we have some number of Tibetar skulls being seized, including the one that was used to be owned by Nicolas Cage. So Leonardo DiCaprio and Nicolas Cage had bidding on this dinosaur, and then Nicolas Cage got the dinosaur skull. And now, so he legally gave up his ownership, so we're going to get this dinosaur skull very soon. So now, Central Museum of Dinosaurs in Mongolia, this museum has now, building, and they actually made some number of exhibits, those dinosaurs sent back to Mongolia, and kids now coming. So it's, starts to getting really nice educational institution. So all dinosaurs that been sent back to Mongolia is in this museum. All the dinosaurs in this museum collections are stolen ones, so went back to the country. So what lessons we learned? So exhibits help the public get excited about the repatriation. So basically, U.S. Attorney Office and Homeland Security did this nice, 3 ceremonies and invited media, and we did these educational activities. And so this is really a good thing, and also they gaining recognition for their efforts. They should be. So volunteers really helps to do this work, because this repatriation project also costly, costs money from both sides. So, and then so be aware of politicians make things political, even fossils, it shouldn't be. So random celebrities can help awareness, because they're very known, and so it's really, some way it's a bad thing, but at the same time, people wear the issue and problem. So since Tibetar case in 2012, Mongolian government basically has changed 5 times. So it was quite challenging for my end. Each time it happens, the people I was working in Mongolia changed, and I have to start over again with each people. But still be successful. We successfully repatriated all those dinosaurs back to Mongolia. So in terms of advocacy work, so I, all through this, I learned that, working with the local officials and community is really important. Also, it can be very sustainable to make this project go for longer. So, so I'm working with local communities and children, so especially go in the heart of the issue and problem, talk with the community and kids, and bring the awareness and importance of fossil heritage, to tell them about why is it important, why we should care, why you should be proud of. And this is the heritage, puts us on a map. So, I do give lectures to kids here in the States, and they very well know about Mongolian dinosaurs. And then I ask, okay, where's Mongolia? Point me on the map. So they point right on the map. So this is, really, cool thing. So this educational project actually started since 2009. So every year, this project going on. In 2015, I was able to get this movable dinosaur museum from American Museum of Natural History and sent it to Mongolia. And it was quite challenging, to have this big stuff cross the ocean. So now it's in Mongolia. So we've been running this project for 3 years. So far, we reached 9 regions. We have a total of 22 regions in Mongolia. So I have still more regions to reach out. Every region in Mongolia. If I could, every citizen of Mongolia should know about this. So I'm waiting for paved roads, because this vehicle doesn't go off the road. It's designed to run on a paved road. So, but I did it actually. I drove these 200 kilometers off-road in the Gobi to reach the Flaming Cliffs, because this is really important. People there should know first, if anything new coming out of Mongolia, especially on dinosaurs. So we created this brochure for tourists and local communities in English and Mongolian on Flaming Cliffs, because this is actually Flaming Cliffs. In terms of tourism, it's one of top 3 sites being visited by tourists. So it's really important. We need to protect, preserve. Historically, also scientifically, culturally, really important site. So this is the current project that I'm focusing on. And so we, planning to build a community museum run by community, because these are people live here, and these are people can protect. These are people should be expert on fossils. So we're going to build this museum, give them tools and knowledge. So we have just the first preliminary architect and design on this museum, but we're not going to make a huge, large museum, because there's a beautiful landscape. We don't want to, having this kind of wall and building, and takes that beauty away. So this will blend with the landscape. It will be very different and use local materials and stuff. So I'd like to thank, people and organizations helped, to do this project and this long journey on bring awareness and education of Mongolian dinosaur fossils. Thank you for your attention. So if you have questions, I'll be happy to take some.
You wait for the mic. Thanks.
And I should mention that we're doing a webcast of this program, so when you ask a question, you're giving permission to appear in a webcast that will be on the library's website at a later date. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not going to ask a question. I just want to stress again the importance of the awareness project that she is running. Right now we are fighting another battle in Texas court for the 5th possible repatriation, and we lost first stage of the battle. And to my surprise, the court ruled that yes, fossils belong to Mongolia, but there was some time, they lost the time in appealing to the court. So to me it sounds like yes, it's stolen, but for technical reasons it cannot be returned to the rightful owner. So that shows us the need of importance of raising awareness not only in Mongolia and in the United States too. And secondly, why 4th repatriation is not taking place. It's again very simple reason. I'm still waiting funds from my government to finance the repatriation process. And that's my battle back at home, to raise the awareness among the Mongolian authorities about the need of returning those fossils. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question. I think it should not be only Mongolians' problems, it should be a global problem. Especially millennials are very much serious about activism and justice and all that. So I think we should, whenever something like that happens, if the stolen fossil is being sold, or if, court decision is unfair because of technicality, there should be international public shaming, and there should be outrage on social media and everywhere. So if there is a hashtag that people should be using, or there should be some kind of, I think, instructions for common people. If we come into, if we hear about an auction, or if we see a fossil, in a museum or something, how can we know it's from Mongolia, or what can we do as normal people or global citizens, that if we find out about information early enough, we can work with you, we can report it. If something is happening, we can, spread the word. So if there's a social media strategy or hashtag, or is there instructions on what we can do about it too?
Mm-hmm. No, it's a good point. This is not just Mongolia's issue and problem. This is actually international. I mean, the fossils is a part of Earth history. It's not just found in Mongolia. And in terms of this poaching and legal collecting issue, not just happening in Mongolia, Argentina has, China has, we have the successful story in terms of how we're fighting now. In terms of bringing awareness, of course, social media would be a good platform. And of course, not everyone is paleontologist to recognize, oh, this is Chinese, this is Mongolian fossils, And, as a paleontologist, I'm open to get any, message, information, send me pictures. I do get, a lot of actually people approach me, say, is this Mongolian fossils? Not only fellow paleontologists, also Mongolians and Americans, people do come to ask me. But I think for me, what is the best solution is government needs to have some, some way set up, let's say, a website. And we have a list of very known international paleontologists working in Mongolia. They are experts. Could have contact information of those people as well, not just me. I will be happy to do it, but it's not just a few people took care and all, but I think government also has to step in. And I mean, one of the suggestions, I actually made some list of recommendations to President's office when I was working on Tibetar case, and one of the suggestions I wrote on it, say we need to have someone especially specialized on, watching auctions. And, I can easily train the person in paleontology how to recognize Mongolian fossils. But, it's a full-time job. So I think it needs to be from all directions and all different, government and agencies and organizations and people and specialists need to be involved. Yeah.
I think we have one question coming from Smithsonian Institution.
Bill Fitzhugh from the Smithsonian. Great example you've set, and I'd like to just comment that this is not just a problem of paleontology, it's cultural heritage in general in Mongolia. We've worked quite a few years there on lots of different projects, but we encounter all the time looted archaeological sites, graves that are torn up. Material is coming out mostly through China. Local people are needing resources and are convinced that they can make an easy sell. The local police very often are looking the other way. The American Center for Mongolian Studies has had a heritage project for several years trying to highlight this. And even last year, some huge number of graves, over 100 graves in the Hovskull area have been looted. And the museum in UB, Bayersaikhan, has been salvaging some of that material and includes fantastic silk garments that were just cast aside by the looters. And so they've been recovering this material by screening it, and the Smithsonian is going to be helping them with conservation. But ultimately, it's local people have to get educated, as you say. Those vehicles have to get off the dirt road, off the paved roads, and there needs to be widespread education to save these resources. Rock art is the same thing. Richard Cordham has been working in that, and it's being pried off the walls and so forth. So your project has done a huge amount to open the knowledge of this problem, and it just needs to spread further and further. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Yeah, I'm aware of the archaeological artifacts being looted, and especially tombs and stuff. I think we need policy, not just say cultural heritage. It should say archaeology, paleontology, and cultural, because we have so much of sources. So the problem is generalizing is the issue, because we really don't see the issue and problem specifically. Each archaeology, paleontological cases are different. We're working with animals, and then of course archaeology is human related. Yeah, so I think we need policy in the government that needed to change, because paleontology fossils are considered as a cultural heritage, but it should be a natural heritage. So that's in terms of words and terms, there's a lot of things, even in law, has to change. That is really important. Yeah, I mean, we have a good law. The part is lacking is the enforcing, and also educating local people, just ordinary citizens, ordinary people. They should have a knowledge about their heritage. This is what really tells us I'm a Mongolian, right? So this is really important, yeah.
Okay, because of the time limitation, we'll take last two questions. I think former Ambassador Piper Campbell.
Hi, my name is Piper Campbell. I had the honor to serve as U.S. Ambassador to Mongolia from 2012 to 2015. And in that job, one of my pleasures was actually to participate in that first repatriation ceremony. So to be in New York when the fossils were returned. And then also to be in Mongolia when Tibetar arrived back home. And to see, as you described so well, that pleasure and that pride in having the dinosaur back. My question is a really basic and naive one, and I apologize in advance because it really is, it's very simplistic. It's easy to, I think it's easy to think about what should happen when you know that a dinosaur has been stolen and is being sold in an auction, as in the examples that you cited. But what do you think about the dinosaur fossils that are in museums in the United States, in Europe, and other places, where you look at those dinosaurs? I imagine that in many cases you can also identify those as having come from Mongolia. And yet at the same time, they serve a purpose in the United States and Europe and other places of educating people, as you said, about this aspect of our global heritage. So what do you think is the right outcome to the sort of the more basic cultural question of who should own those items and how those relationships should work between countries?
Well, that's a really good question, and also it's kind of sensitive. As you know, it's not just happening for dinosaurs, it's happening, cultural heritage, like Egyptian mummies, So, yeah, I mean, since 1920s, Mongolian dinosaurs left home, and for research purpose, because, I mean, things can't be one way. There's, two ways. It was bad for Mongolians because of that. Local peoples and Mongolians didn't really learn about their fossil heritage and exciting discoveries. And then we have a very few paleontologists because of this, I mean, I wouldn't say directly the cause, but but the same time actually brought a lot of global interest on Mongolia and made a lot of important scientific discoveries and number of fossils, addressing interesting science questions, and then displaying in the exhibits, excited who knows how many people become paleontologists. And I know in my personal experience from my fellow paleontologists from US, they often come to me, say, Mongolian fossils are very exciting and interesting. And that 1920s expedition, and I read story about Mongolia, and I really wanted to be paleontologist. And number of people actually become paleontologists, and they often say, want to go to Mongolia, So that's a really positive thing. But at the same time, this question about who owns the fossil, this is the fossil actually tells us a lot about Earth history. Everybody have a right to know. Everybody, it's a really good knowledge. But then you happen to find from Mongolia, so we should be responsible to take care of it. So, let us do it. I mean, that is the thing, is important. And it's good fossils that good taking care of these international museums, but at the same time, some point it's important, Mongolia should be part of it. So that's the way I will look at it. I mean, it's not like a matter of bringing back or not. Of course, this is more, the government and between countries things, but as a scientist, for me, it's important also fossils should be in Mongolia because, all this thing, it's been challenging for me to train next generation of Mongolian paleontologists. Imagine I have 2 students in Mongolia. I wanted them to study dinosaurs, and they will be traveling so many countries. I don't have such money to cover their expenses. It's really hard. So how you can balance this thing. And we the people protect this, but at the same time we should be also scientists to study and join with the international science community. So it's tricky. Yeah.
The last question is from Dr. Christopher Atwood.
So that was a really great experience. I just wanted to ask, do we have, I know that it's because it's illegal, of course, it's hard to track, but do we have any sense of, is law enforcement sort of, is it winning or is it losing against this trade? Are seizures up? Are they down? Is the somewhat increasing prosperity of Mongolia maybe making it a little bit easier to stop people from, trying to get out of poverty by selling dinosaur eggs? What are the trend lines? What's going on in terms of is the number of fossils that are being illegally excavated and exported, or just is it growing or diminishing? What can you tell us about that situation?
Well, I can't tell you any numbers or anything, but in terms of how much it really got global attention, and as you know, like the main markets that been feeding is the auction and online auction sites. My sense is going down, but at the same time it's probably going on the table too. So that's the thing is really concerned, and also the same time this was a good positive thing, but then people would say, oh, okay, dinosaur bone can cost money. So it could be opening new, markets to new people. I mean, that's the thing is kind of danger of it. And so that's why I'm racing with this to educate more people. And, more educated you are and more you, go along with to fighting with this issue, not part of the problem. So that's probably what is, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Many of you already know about the Mongolian collection, so today I'm only going to introduce you a little bit to the current display in the reading room. And given the theme of today's conference, I focused on the Gobi area. So I've called the display Paleontology and Cultural Heritage of Mongolia's Gobi. The selection includes books by and about Roy Chapman Andrews, who discovered the first dinosaur bones fossils in 1922, as well as other early explorers and scientists. You will also see books on Mongolian paleontology in Mongolian, Russian, English, Polish, various languages, as well as books on the cultural heritage of the Gobi. Its history, legends, literature, folk songs, archaeology, wildlife, including a nice book about the Gobi bear, as well as a general selection of recently acquired books. We also have two very beautiful Mongolian maps in the display, provided for us by the Library's Geography and Map Division. These are the two maps, a Mongolian distribution map of Mongolian dinosaurs and Paleontologen-Zurk. And we included also two books from the Mongolian Rare Book Collection. This is a manuscript of Dansen Ravja's Story of the Paper Bird, written in 1825. And this is a 19th century xylograph of Prayers for White Tara. It is in reduced size for easy carrying through remote areas such as the Gobi Desert. And it was acquired by anthropologist Bertold Laufer, who was an anthropologist who collected materials for the Field Museum in Chicago and the John Crear Library in Chicago, which were later transferred to the Library of Congress in 1917. So this is from that collection. So the Asian Reading Room is located in Jefferson LJ 150, just across the hall from here. And this is our website. We hope that later you can visit the Library of Congress for your research. And maybe we should take maybe 15 minutes to enjoy some refreshments and then meet by the door, and I can escort you over to the Asian Reading Room to see the display. So thank you very much for coming. We've had such wonderful presentations from both the ambassador and Bolortsegtseg. So thank you very much, and enjoy the display when we leave. Thank you.